I'm joined now by Amy Austin Holmes. She's a visiting scholar of the Middle East Initiative at the Harvard Kennedy School. She's also a fellow at the Wilson Center. So, Amy, I want to get your assessment of the situation right now, especially the seriousness of the recent actions within the last 24 hours.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. It is indeed a very worrying and very serious situation, both in terms of the humanitarian aspect, with an estimated 1 million people have fled from Idlib in under 3 months. So some consider this to be the worst humanitarian disaster in the 9-year civil war. But it's also very serious because of the escalation now between Turkey and the Syrian regime and Russia, who of course is backing Bashar al-Assad. Turkey, the number of Turkish soldiers that were killed yesterday is somewhat disputed. Some claim that it's over 50, perhaps over 100. It's not clear, but in any case, I think Erdogan did not expect this because of the, relatively the attempt by Ankara to move closer to Russia, especially after the purchase of the S-400s, which angered the United States and especially members of Congress. So we're kind of at a turning point where I think the U.S. is looking at the situation there very closely, and as you just reported, NATO and Angela Merkel and Trump have all expressed sympathy for Turkey.
It's a tough situation, and Putin and Erdogan have been talking on and off for weeks now. So they had this phone conversation with a possible summit meeting next week in person. There's a lot of finger pointing. So do you expect to see any de-escalation at all, or will it get worse?
Well, personally, I hope from a humanitarian perspective that there would be a de-escalation. It will depend what Putin and Erdogan agree to. I think that Senator Lindsey Graham had even called for a no-fly zone yesterday. Potentially, this would mean the U.S. has not actually been active in this area in Idlib, really. I mean, it's been under the Russian kind of sphere of influence. So if the U.S. were to decide to do this, this is also potentially, a problem for Russia because they see this as their area of operations, whereas the U.S. has been east of the Euphrates in the areas where the SDF has been in control. So the potential for conflict is multi-dimensional, I guess.
And they keep reverting back to the 2018 ceasefire. Why has it been so difficult to stick to those terms?
Well, because Turkey has a number of outposts in Idlib and around Idlib, and they are, Erdogan has demanded that the Syrian regime stop advancing on Idlib. But Bashar al-Assad seems to believe that he can continue because he has support of Russia and also Iran. It's interesting, actually, to think about what Turkey is actually doing in Idlib because, a lot of the other Turkish actions in northern Syria have always been justified because of the presence of Kurds and the Syrian Democratic Forces and the YPG component of the Syrian Democratic Forces. However, in Idlib, it's not about this at all. Right, so there's actually a very different, dynamic here in Idlib than in the east of the Euphrates. Some people believe that if Turkey were to withdraw from Idlib, if they were to, remove their outposts, that this would lead to, a domino effect where then they would also need to withdraw from Afrin, Tel Abyad, Ras Al Ain, these other areas, and that Turkey doesn't want that. It's also the case that Turkey has close relations with these, Islamist groups that have been operating and have now made Idlib their stronghold, which is very problematic because they've actually been fighting against the Syrian Democratic Forces, who the U.S., they've been our main partner now since 2015. So, it's not clear exactly what will happen. I personally hope that we can, prevent further casualties, and that the U.S. could, with NATO, perhaps work out a vetting process to distinguish between those who are really Islamist extremist groups like Hayat Tahrir Sham or others that are operating there, and those civilians who have no connection to them and who are suffering and who need some kind of safe haven where they can live And you know, that we could find out some way to support perhaps the SDF to allow them to take in some of these IDPs, support Turkey, because otherwise they're just facing, you know, bombs from Russia and the Syrian regime, and it's horrific to watch.
It is so complicated. Amy Austin Holmes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.